Hello everyone, this is Max Boyles, and this is my final presentation for personal and preferred theory. So firstly, for the outline, this is the introduction. I'll then transition into religious identity and then how it ties into Smith's model of atheist identity development. Tie in that with intersectionality of religiosity, how the research is currently. I will summarize Smith concisely, and then present my own personal theory, and summarize my own personal theory, followed by an appropriate reference. For religious identity, it's often broken down into a handful of terms. There's spirituality, beliefs, religion, and faith. These terms have different nuance to them, even though they are typically used interchangeably. Think of it kind of as spirituality being the most personal, religious identity development, and faith being a larger, more of a group organization, as opposed to the individual. So like, spirituality is a single thing, belief is another, and I'll go into this in the next slide. But the major thing is religious identity is going to fundamentally shape student development, because every religion will have their set of morals and values that are established within their doctrines. So here is a graphic of the distinctions between these four terms. Spirituality is on the personal side. It is how we understand ourselves. Belief is agreeing and understanding other doctrines. Religion is like a bigger version of belief because it's a collection of these beliefs. And a faith is being able to understand the nuances of the three and bring it all together so it makes sense. So why is it important to understand religious identity development? Well, the same way that we can understand an atheist's religious development. They, instead of having perhaps a more group-oriented understanding of religion or faith, they did not have that, or have chosen to avoid that. Specifically, though, with Smith, he basically was trying to fill in a gap, because in other religiously founded theories, atheists were often left out of the conversation. He essentially was saying that self-identified atheists were non-theistic in atheistic society. Which, looking at it from that perspective, it does sound like it is fundamentally true. However, when he was doing his study, of the 40 participants that ranged from 18 to 92, demographically speaking, these were regular adults. They were primarily white, college educated, and it was not clearly stated if there was a gender characteristic in this. So I don't know if these participants were primarily male as well. With the results of Smith's research from these interviews, what was basically found were 4 unique stages. So the first being the ubiquity of theism. Essentially, everybody in their younger years just kind of accepts that there is an existence of a God. So it hasn't reached a point of questioning. And then that leads to questioning, because as soon as people start to see and are cohesive mentally, they're able to question, why are things as they are? And then this is where people tend to start to unlearn what they have learned previously, because now they're starting to have new understanding, new contexts. And then this is where a lot of people see atheists as those rejecting theism, to completely go and take what they've learned from their questioning stage and specifically take this stage of rejecting theism to create a new identity for themselves. And then this leads to a unique phrasing of coming out as atheist. And it makes some sense, because atheism is still occasionally seen as an outlier, an interloper identity to have, especially in this day and age still, because people are not always used to the idea of someone being atheist or having a non-traditional religious viewpoint. And this is particular stage, the stage 4. They've accepted their identity. They now can affirm who they are, how they believe. So ultimately, the results of the interviews that Smith had primarily positive results, especially for those in the later stages, because they were able to fully express themselves. They were able to come to terms with their identity so that they could live peacefully within themselves and within society. Now, still, and this was part of the results as well, due to the atheists going against social norms, there's still going to be some hesitant and some pushback from other theists. Because, as I had mentioned before, atheists are still technically considered interlopers. But there is a chance for them yet. For intersectionality, students who are atheistic will come from different backgrounds, and that can shape their understanding of their atheism or their theism. So, just as examples that came to my head, a student that grew up Catholic is going to have a different relationship with religion than a student who is pagan. That is just a thing. Because I grew up Christian, I'm still going to have a different relationship with paganism than I am with Christianity. Or even an LGBT student who's going to have a different connection to faith than someone who is cisgender or heterosexual. Because in some instances, the Bible does say, a man shall not lie with man, or a man shall not lie with boy. So someone who is LGBT may experience grief and discomfort at the notion of they may go to hell if they continue to be this way. So that also shapes how they perceive themselves. Or a woman's interpretation of religious struggle is going to be different than that of a man. Sometimes men do not have as much empathy as a woman. Empathy is something that is taught. And women are often taught to be over-empathetic to others. So their interpretation of religion is going to be different than that of a man. Regardless of all of that, it is important to be mindful and respectful of students and where they come from and meet them where they're at. Because ultimately, if they tell you or not, it's not our place to judge them, but only to guide them on their journey. For research, there's going to need to be more research that is conducted with those that fall outside of the typical religious lens, and how that religiosity is going to impact identity development. Students that are a part of minoritized groups are going to need more scholarship related to them so as to best know how to assist them in their growth, to both be qualitatively driven to represent their unique identities within and without the context of faith. So, low-income backgrounds, specifically LGBT students, historically black colleges and universities, tribal and minority serving institutions. And that's only a short list. There is so much room for research to be made that can benefit not only traditional students or majoritized students, but minoritized students. Because ultimately, if we know how to assist minoritized students, we can still learn to assist majoritized students. A lot of the research is already geared towards majoritized students. So if we can help research and build scholarship to identify what is needed for minoritized students, we can further assist all of our students. All right, so to summarize Smith, with Smith's model, I do think it is a very good first step towards qualitatively understanding atheist identities. The negatives of the model's research is that the demographic of the sample were primarily white with college education as their background, making understanding of other student situations more difficult, especially students that might not have been able to finish school, who might not have gotten into school anyway. So it's a limiting research model, but it does give valid results. Religious and spiritual development for students is going to be important, if only so students can be content with their sense of self, so they are able to find meaning in their own existence. So going into my personal theory, ultimately I want to create and holistically help students improve. And by doing that, I have to be mindful of their identities, because that is a key part of them. And to also be mindful of students' demographics. So like if they're a first-gen student or if they're a transferring student, these different specific demographics are going to tell me a little bit about the student without them having to tell me everything about their life. So it offers a blip of who they are as a person. Because a first generation student is likely not going to have a similar situation to a transferring student. Or a veteran is not going to have the same kind of situation as a parent. Now, there are going to be some overlaps, but that creates a better nuanced image of a student. And essentially, the students that I've seen that want to succeed, that want to get in, they are going to absolutely do their best. So for my job, I am mindful of the barriers of entry. So because I do work in admissions, I often get to answer questions about financial aid, about advising in classes, and ultimately what is necessary to get into the school. And there are times when some of these students are like, I have never done that before in my life. In that moment, I get to say, okay, that's fine. Here's what we can do. Offer a solution. Because ultimately, I always consider what can I do to help you succeed? How can I help you? Because ultimately, beyond working as an admin, I'm helping provide a service. That service is education. I just happen to be one of the first people that they interact with. And there are often times when students need flexibility. So we need to be empathetic. And that goes into the next part. Because there are times when there are parents specifically that I can think of for the last week that are like, I can't meet that specific deadline. Can I reschedule? Especially when it comes to doing Accuplacer testing. Not everybody can get off on a Friday at 9:30. So we have to be flexible with other people's schedules, because if they're trying to get in, why actively be a barrier to their success? If it means that they come in on a Thursday and they are able to take the assessment and are able to get registered for classes, that is a success. Because if I'm able to assist a student and they are then able to take the necessary steps on their own after I've helped them get in, they're going to have a better time of starting and finishing their classes. Ultimately, students are going to be very complex people. You're never going to know everything about them. That's why understanding the demographic of the student is going to be so important. What kind of identities they might have is going to be so important, because with those blips, those tags, you can understand, even just briefly, what kind of student they could be. Now, how does this potentially tie in to Smith's model? Well, I personally am pagan. I'm a Norse pagan. So I already see the world through a different religious lens than other individuals. You and others might not see that directly on me whenever we're speaking, whenever we're corresponding. I have my own nuance. But that also means I try to be mindful of other people's nuance, because I myself already fall out of the typical sphere of religion. And I think ultimately it's just going to be important to be empathetic and to just help students succeed because the ones that want to will. Now, I thought it would be wise to include a graphic essentially of where I'm coming at with this, because it's easier to organize things in a graphic. Now, because I do the admissions and some recruitment, this is going to be the first stage that students are often going to see. These are the first crucial interactions. And also, this is where a lot of students are going to voice their goals, their aspirations. Why would they go to school? Why not go to school? Or, in some cases, why they want change in their life. Because I work basically at a trade school where people who have either worked in an industry before but seek a change, that's going to be their go-to, because instead of going for a bachelor's degree that takes 4 years, they might take an expedited course that only takes a semester. Or if they're going for something else, they could the time investment is less. So you're going to see students that have a more I need something and I need something soon for results. So in that first contact, it's what you're going to see. For student background, this is going back into like how you can really utilize more formal theories so that you can identify how to help a student. Now, I used Belenki's Woman's Way of Knowing because in some cases, especially for freshmen, there are going to be lady students that are like, I have no idea. Why don't you tell me? And in being a guiding hand, you can be like, well, this is your choice. This is your decision. Why not do something that you would like to do in addressing the student? So then it can help in a more direct way of not only using a theory, but also guiding a student into the understanding that they have the option to forge their own path and thus create the stronger inner voice to have confidence in their own actions and in themselves. That's what I meant by background. For the demographic, it's in my head, it was definitely to understand more of how student affairs can actually help students. So I did give this example: a first-generation student is going to need different support than a transfer student. That's just true. And the same can be said of a parent versus an immigrant. Now, an immigrant will need different documents. A veteran may need also different documents, but ultimately their assistance is going to be different in structure. An immigrant may need assistance from student success in order to have additional time to do testing or have someone translate an assignment into something that's more easily comprehensible. Or perhaps a veteran may actually need assistance physically, because some people do not have all of their limbs. Because there was a gentleman, this is a short tangent, there was a gentleman the other day that lost his right hand in an accident. So he was forced to learn how to write with his left hand. He occasionally has assistance with typing up his assignments in student success. So if it's available, it is going to be a thing that can help a student succeed. This all leads ultimately to a path of improvement, because after we know the first 3 crucial things of like what we learned from first contact, our student background, and their demographic, we can really assist them in what needs to happen next. because sometimes it's a physical need and sometimes it's going to just be an identity thing. By understanding these aspects of a student, we can potentially have we can find the best ways to provide assistance for the student so that they can improve and succeed and maybe even help find themselves. Because ultimately, as students start to grow and their frontal lobe starts to develop, because approximately age 25 for neurotypical students and about 35 for neurodivergent students, their frontal lobes are going to still be maturing. And they're going to learn more about themselves in college. They're going to be forced to interact with different students. They're going to interact with different professors and different assignments that may challenge them. But if we know what kind of actions we can take as professionals, we can help them help themselves. So to simplify and summarize my personal theory is how I am on the daily. Student Affairs is starting to do more research in more holistic methods of student development. And I'm more concerned about what outside factors may hinder students and what may hinder their development. Students are more than data points. They're going to be variables of they are just going to be variables of what makes a person a person. It is best to never assume, but to always try to be a positive influence in students' lives. We can be empathetic with students. And the students that want to succeed, it's our job to guide them towards their own success. Hello, here are the references. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great rest of your day.